Hi, this is Anna Imagination. We're going to go ahead and break down something that I love to talk about. This is that moment where you've accumulated a bunch of ideas, usually in a think tank, and now you're in the process of transferring that data over into action. Now, this is where a lot of people struggle because I've seen this so many times, so many times. This is psychology, logic, mathematics on a level that most people are completely unaware of. We are not taught to do this, and it shows. It is saturated in our culture. That's why there's a lot of talking without very much action. This is where a lot of people are looking at it going, I don't understand. We got this now. What do we do now? So this is what you do now. And this is the difference between an ethical leader and literally everybody else. To be blunt, this is the education that you get from leadership. This is not at all taught to followers. If you are in an educational system where you are being groomed to follow and obey, I call it obedient following, you're not going to get this information because this is where action takes place. So this is the juice. Here's how it works. When you accumulate a bunch of ideas, the very first question that needs to be asked is how much of this information is relevant and or related? And these are two completely different things. Whenever a mathematician sits down to analyze data to determine if it's part of the problem or not, this is what they do. So I'm going to go ahead and pull up a whiteboard. You do not need to know mathematics to do this. What you need is some basic logic. And you also need to be aware of the basis. So I'm going to put in here the basis. We're going to call this a control group. And if you are unfamiliar with the characteristics of a control group, you're not going to be able to pull this off. There's just absolutely no way. So the characteristics of a control group is literally the grounding template. It is the template of data that a person requires in order to know if something is relevant or not. And this is why people talk without putting anything into action, is because they don't have a control group or a characteristics template. Now, in the case of mental health, that template is literally the subconscious mind. And because no one knows the template of the subconscious mind, no one can proceed, which is why the mental healing crisis has been where it's been for so long. So the template is the subconscious mind. So what we have now is you've got data. So we're going to go ahead and call this data points. We're going to have data points 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And this is where everyone usually sits in a think tank and they put all these data points together. And that's where it ends. Now, when you have data points, you have two things that you look at. The first thing that you look at is it relevant to the problem? And the second thing is it related to the problem? Now, in order to answer either one of these questions, you have to know the control group, which is, in this case, subconscious mind. So we're going to go ahead and use mental illness and the subconscious mind as the example. So we have a problem, and the problem is the mental health crisis. And in order to know what the solution is, you have to know the control group, which is how does a subconscious mind work? And this is ultimately it, is how does a subconscious mind work? If you do not have this data, this is not going to work, bottom line, because you need that control group. You need the template. So when you fill all these data points, you then have to look at the relevancy to the problem and the related to the problem. Now, this is going to immediately categorize things into two things. I'm going to go ahead and pull a T-graph here due to our beautiful, beautiful mathematics. So this is a T-graph. And this is where we're going to steep a little bit into high school math. And you're going to see something called common denominators. Now, something is either a common denominator or it is an anomaly. And those are your options: common denominator or an anomaly. And there you have it. So when you are going through this, when you are sorting through your data points, the question you need to be asking is this a common denominator and is this an anomaly? An anomaly is related but irrelevant. And a common denominator is a variable, a fixed variable. Very, very, very important. It is also related and relevant. If you do not have the skills to determine, if you do not have the control group, if you do not have the data to determine if something is related and relevant, you're not going to go anywhere. Stop immediately, dead in the water. You shall not pass. Bottom line, there is no getting past this point without having your control group, without having your characteristics template, without understanding, in our example, how the subconscious mind works, which is why there's a mental health crisis, is because no one has the control group, because no one knows how the subconscious mind works. So everyone is trying to proceed into the next stage without having the basic control group answered. No one knows how the subconscious mind works. As a result, no one's being able to proceed. We can see all the evidence, which brings me to another point. In addition to the common denominator and the anomaly, there is also one other massive aspect here that is being overlooked. And this aspect that is being overlooked is also, and this is really, really vital, the catalyst and a symptom. Now, this is where a person has to be studied in the difference between a catalyst, symptom, and chain reaction science. Chain reaction science is a passion of mine. Chain reaction science. A chain reaction science is literally the ability, it's all of this. This is exactly what it is. It's the ability to look at something and go, this is a common denominator, this is an anomaly, this is the catalyst, this is the symptom, this caused this. Now, in chain reaction science, there is a red herring. I learned yesterday that red herring is actually a kipper, which was fascinating to me. So there are two catalysts. There is the fake or the false catalyst. And this is what only mathematicians know. You have to be like advanced math to understand this, or not to understand it, but to know it. And then the other thing is the invisible catalyst or the true catalyst. I'm going to be using the show Numbers to explain this. If you have not seen the show Numbers, you might be a little lost in my example. If you've seen the show Numbers, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. The show Numbers is about a mathematician genius and his FBI brother. The FBI brother brings in his mathematician genius brother all the time to help him solve cases. One of the most common cases that you see in the show over and over again, because it's an FBI show, is serial killers. Serial killing is the absolute primary example of this because it is so true. The reason why serial killers succeed so much is because they have perfected murder. That's right. They have actually perfected murder. Now, everybody knows this. FBI people know this. Murderers know this. The only people who don't know this are the innocent people and the ethical people who don't kill people. Psychology. So that's how I know it. And when you look into the mindset of a serial killer, they are usually, they are very proud that they have perfected murder. This is so horrible. Whenever you kill someone, you leave evidence all over the place as to who did it and why. But when you are a serial killer, they have refined, this is so disgusting, the art. They have, excuse the analogy, but they have refined the art of killing people to the point where they can do it without leaving evidence. Now, we see this in FBI shows, and that's how we know, this is all done by the same person. It's literally a thumbprint or a fingerprint of a personality type. Now, there is something in these shows that we hear of called the catalyst or the first murder. Now, this is where it gets to be false. This is where there's a lot of focus on the first murder. The first murder is actually a false catalyst, and that is because that is the first perfected murder. The true catalyst is the first murder that was not perfect. You find that, and you know who did it. So whenever there is a serial killer episode, this is no matter what FBI show you look at, whenever you analyze the psychology of a serial killer, this is how they do it. They look for the first murder that was not perfect. The problem that they have, the challenge, is linking the first murder to the perfected murders. Now, the first perfect murder is the invisible or the false catalyst. This looks like the catalyst, but it's not. This is true in every single chain reaction that exists. The second thing that's available is the invisible or the true catalyst. The true catalyst is the imperfect murder. And the FBI detectives always look for the invisible or the true catalyst. A true catalyst is always invisible because a catalyst causes something. Something, whatever it causes, the symptom, is always visible. For instance, if you are sick, the true catalyst is the invisible germ. The symptom is the chain reaction. It's the result of. So this is consequence. 100%. A symptom is a consequence. Now, medical people know that if you treat a symptom, it's not going to go away because you're not treating the true source. The catalyst is the source. You have to address the cause. The catalyst is the cause. Now, in mental health, this is no different. In mental health, what you end up having is there is the cause of the mental health, but everyone is focused on the symptom. And what most people fester or fixate on is the first symptom, which is a toxic boyfriend, a toxic partner, a toxic spouse, a toxic decision, because that's what's visible. So everyone focuses on the symptoms. Everyone focuses on all of the mental illnesses. Everyone focuses on the choices that were made that were bad or toxic that led to further mental illness. These are all symptoms. These are all consequences. You can treat those all day long and they're not going to do anything, which is what the entire world is doing right now, is we are all treating symptoms and consequences. So trailing it back to figure out where the true catalyst is, that is true problem solving. This is the science of problem solving. It's knowing when you are looking at an anomaly or a common denominator. It is knowing when you are looking at a symptom versus a catalyst. It is knowing when you're focused on the red herring. So this is really vital. The symptom is the red herring. And 98% of the people on the planet, 99% of the people on the planet, 100% of the people on the planet who are in charge of mental health are focused on the red herring because they lack the math and the logic to realize they're chasing a red herring. The symptoms are not relevant, not at all. They're consequences. That's like the DSM-5 is like having a book of all of the medical symptoms of a virus without ever talking about the actual virus. Now, when you are looking at variables, back to the common denominator anomaly, you have variable and you have fixed. You have two kinds of variables. You have a variable, which means can be varied, and then you have a fixed variable, which is actually called a constant. The constants in mathematics equals truth. In addition to equaling truth, it also equals equilibrium, which is why we use the word in mathematics equals, because it is about balance. And everyone who does math or physics knows Mother Nature's obsession with equilibrium and balance. So when you are collecting data points. What you are doing is you are analyzing whether or not these are common denominators or flukes or anomalies. Now, understanding why something is an anomaly is vital. Basically, you have grouping. And grouping is basically categories. It 100% is categories. And understanding how to categorize something is absolutely determining whether or not it is relevant or irrelevant to something. So you have grouping. In order to define if something is grouping, then you have to do something called compartmentalization. Now, we all know what that means because we've all done that, compartmentalization. This is actually a logical skill that every single one of us is born with, that we do naturally, instinctively, due to Mother Nature. So we're mostly proficient. We are very highly proficient in compartmentalizing. However, if you're not strategically using it with deliberation, you're never going to advance beyond that skill set. So it's really vital that you become aware of how to use compartmentalization strategically with deliberation so you can direct that skill into something useful, like problem solving. So you have grouping, categories, and compartmentalization, which is all pretty much the same thing. In order to group something, you have to know the types. And in order to know the types, you have to have dun, 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 the control group. So the control group allows you to identify grouping. Once you define how does the subconscious mind work, you now have the ability to establish types. When you have the ability to establish types, you have the ability to do grouping, categories, compartmentalization. Once you do that, you have the ability, this is called order of operations that I'm going through right now with you. Order of operations is vital to understanding chain reaction science. It is so important that I'm going to put it over here in these words. Order of operations is vital. Order of operations is understanding something called sequencing. It is sequencing. It is also referred to as prerequisitional. I love that word. And in addition to being prerequisitional, it also has the ability, I'm still very, very mentally disturbed over my serial killer examples. Like I am really, I just need a minute. I'm still like so disturbed over that example, but it was, I really need to come up with a better one because that one is just, it's so disturbing to me every time I review. So just give me a minute. I need to ground myself back into. So you have sequencing, you have prerequisitional, and this is all order of operations. It's understanding, and this is really something that a lot of people do not understand about mathematics, about life in general, is you have, the best way to explain this is a standalone or independent versus, well, a sequence. And this leads to pattern recognition, which is a huge, huge part of mathematics. So there you go. So when you get into the science of chain reaction, you are delving real deep into the order of operations. Order of operations very much contains sequencing, prerequisitional. What's the word I'm looking for? When something is prerequisitional requirements, that's it. And then standalone, independent versus sequence, which you would then have pattern recognition. Those characteristics, we're going to break those down because that is vital to your control group. This is vital to understanding problem solving. Sequencing is the prerequisitional requirements. It's literally the entire book if you give a mouse a cookie. That is the entire book, is problem solving of if you do X, it's going to lead to B. It's all chain reaction science. The whole book of give a mouse a cookie, if you give a mouse a cookie, that is chain reaction science. It is the order of operations. It is the difference between, I'm going to read this Harry Potter book at book 5 and not read books 1 through 4. That is prerequisitional requirements. It is a sequence. It is not independent. In language and in writing, we refer to this as the clauses. We have independent clauses and we have dependent clauses. The dependent clauses depend on a subject. Yes, a subject of a prior sentence. You remove that subject from that prior sentence, and you are not going to have a dependent clause, or you are not going to have an independent clause because it depends on that subject to make sense. That's why we call it a sentence, because it makes sense. So when we're doing mathematics, it's the same thing. It's the difference between deciding to read a magic treehouse book at random versus I'm going to read these in order, because it's prerequisitional requirements. Now, one of the biggest logical fallacies in the world is this. The academic logical studies give me a minute. The academic studies of subject, that's what I'm trying to say. The academic study of subjects are prerequisitional. A lot of people do not know this. Plato knew it. Plato knew it, which is why Alexandria taught these in a very specific order. The subjects of academic study are prerequisitional to each other. So if you are studying anything that is math or higher and you struggle with it, it's because you lack the prerequisitions prior to that. The prerequisition of physics is math. The prerequisition of math is logic. The prerequisition of logic is theater and stage and linguistics. The prerequisition of theater and stage is reading and writing. We remove theater, stage, and logic from our educational system, which is why so many people struggle with math, which is why you don't know this. Because the academic studies of subjects are prerequisitional. So now when you're in a think tank and you're trying to problem solve and you don't know how to take your idea into action, it's because of this. It's because you don't have this information. We do not teach it to people. So when you have your control group and you have your types, there is an order of operations that must be followed. The first thing you have to do is grouping, category, and compartmentalization. In order to do that, you have to know the types. When you do that, then you have to determine your data points. You collect your data points. Most think tanks are really good with this, and then they stop. They go no further. From there, you have to decipher the common denominator from the anomaly. When something is an anomaly, it actually belongs to just a different group, a related but irrelevant group. So we're going to use color as an example. Let's say you have a bag of marbles. Now, they are all related because they're marbles, but we are only going to be looking at the red marbles. No, better yet, we're going to be looking at the purple marbles. So we are looking at the purple marbles. Now, we're going to type in a logical code into the program where I say I only want the purple, I only want the red marbles. And I'm going to get two types of marbles. I'm going to get all the red marbles and I'm going to get all the purple marbles. The reason why I'm getting the purple marbles is because they contain red, but that's not what I want. The purple marbles, are anomalies. And this is what happens when we see a murder case. This is what happens whenever we see anything that we are collecting a group on. We are looking for common denominators, but the characteristics of other groups that are related but not relevant are going to pop up. And we call those anomalies. Really, they are just characteristics. They share characteristics, but they belong to a different group. So as a result, you have to have the ability to identify the anomaly from the common denominator. Oh, this is related. This is how it's related, but it's not relevant. Relevancy is it part of the chain reaction? If it's not part of the chain reaction, it's irrelevant. So it might be related as in it's got similar, identical characteristics in your grouping. However, it is not related to the chain reaction. A great example of this is siblings. When you have an abusive parent You have multiple siblings in some cases. You have one sibling doing behavior A, you have another sibling doing behavior B. Now, each sibling has their own series of chain reactions. They might have moments where those chain reactions come together. And when you have those moments where those chain reactions come together, where they're similar, that's where they have the anomaly, where that's related because they're relative, but they're not relevant in the sense of they have absolutely nothing to do with the chain reaction. This is what happens when we try and analyze our history and we're trying to figure out where exactly the core of the problem is. And instead of looking at the invisible catalyst, we are preoccupied with an anomaly. We spend a lot of time focused on anomalies. We spend a lot of time analyzing anomalies. And because we're not sorting the common denominators from the anomaly when we're doing data points, because we don't know how, we are now making calculations based off of inaccurate information, and now we are getting incorrect information. In most cases, we don't even have the entire data point. In most cases, because we do not have the control group, and because we do not have the entire problem-solving process, we do not have the ability to actually see all of the correct data points. I have been through over 20 think tanks in the last 2 years, and I watched people put together all of these ideas for data points, and not one of them brought up the actual catalyst or the common denominators. Every single one of them only talked about the anomalies and the symptoms. And because all of them, every single one, lacked the actual data required, they were not able to formulate a proper plan. They were coming up with the same information that we've already seen from the professionals who actually study this, who still don't know how the subconscious mind works. And as a result, they are coming up with false information, false equations, false data, and they have an entire book dedicated to all the unrelated symptoms that have nothing to do with the catalyst because they don't have a control group, which is how does the subconscious mind work? It is extraordinary to watch this entire thing unfold. So when you get to a point where you're able to sort out the common denominators from the anomalies, and then you have the ability to sit down with the chain reaction science and understand what is the order of operations, the sequencing for the events, that allows you to separate, okay, these are anomalies over here, they're not related. These are the common denominators. These are the order of operations in which the common denominator took place. And here is the catalyst. Oh, but wait, this is the false catalyst because you need the invisible true catalyst, which is how does the subconscious mind work? When you know how a subconscious mind works, you can identify the true catalyst, and then you can identify all of the symptoms, and you change this feature here. It's called waterfall effect. You change that and boop, the whole thing, chain reactions, dominoes through and immediately solves everything. Exactly like in a medical field, when you get a shot of penicillin to take care of something. You're not addressing all of the symptoms. You can manage the symptoms, which is literally what all of mental health is doing, is it's managing symptoms, but they are not addressing the problem. The problem is, how does a subconscious mind work? This is all that needs to take place when you have a think tank and you're ready to put it into action. Once you have the solution, once you have the actual control group and the invisible catalyst, now you have the ability to sit down with that data and ask the next question. And the next question, once you have that invisible catalyst, is how do you solve, or what is the, I hate how questions, what is the solution for this catalyst? And that is the right question. Thank you, Douglas. So when you ask the question, what is the solution for this catalyst? Now you can start analyzing how the catalyst works, what its behavior is. Now it becomes a behavior versus, now it's chess. It's literally just a chess match. And now you can use chain reaction science strategically to predict the movements of something. We call this mathematical projection. Another massively huge part of mathematics is mathematical projection. So you have your chain reaction science strategically to predict the movements of something, mathematical projection, so you know how it's going to move. People who are in finance and stocks and bonds, they know how people choose to buy and sell when something happens in the market. When they know how people behave with stocks and bonds, when something happens in the market, they know exactly what to or not to sell and buy, and that's how you become rich. Because they understand the chain reaction science of human behavior when it comes to buying and selling stocks and bonds. It's mathematical projection with understanding chain reaction science. You can literally do anything. It's how you solve 20 steps ahead of a chess match. It's because you know the behavioral science of how your opponent is going to move. Once you have that information, your game, set, match. It's done. So when you are dealing with an entire group of people, when it comes to mental health, the entire thing, the entire 8 billion of us are literally moving with chain reaction science. It's highly complex. It's absolutely beautiful. And there's only 12 variations of our personalities. Only 12. Once you know exactly what the 12 variations of our personalities are, you can predict exactly how all 12 of us are going to move. 12 of us. You know exactly how they're all going to interact. And once you start to see how they all move and interact with each other, you know exactly where the catalyst is and how it's all going to move and exactly how the entire domino is going to just fall over. So once you have the ability to use chain reaction science in this method to sit down and predict the behavior and the movements and the actions of other people, you now have the ability to put together a strategic plan that will use that behavioral science to your advantage. Now you have a plan. Once you have the plan, the very next thing that you need to do is put it into motion. Now, putting a plan in motion requires one thing. There's only one requirement for putting a plan in motion. Passionate people. That's it. I call this emotional energy. Specifically, I call it emotional transaction for human connection. Emotional transactions for human connection. Now, once you have that, that leads to power economics, where desire, passion, excitement with direction leads to action. Welcome to physics. When you realize that economics and physics are the same thing, your life changes. So now, after using mathematical problem solving and human behavior, we have the ability then to implement physics and economics into networking so that things now propel forward. In order to do that, you have to be a leader. The leader is the person responsible for overseeing the problem solving, which is the mathematical projection of everything you just saw. They have to be able to analyze human behavior on such a level. And they have to, and I'm going to say a multifaceted, this is vital, a multifaceted translating this. Just give me a minute. I got to pull it from my brain. It's multifaceted point of view. To make an accurate projection, we call this forecasting in economics. on how the physics will play out. The human physics will play out. Once you build a plan over that, and that is literally how you plan. How to plan. You then assign, and then because they are inspired through excitement and passion, we call that again emotional energy. They transfer their potential emotional energy, physics again, emotional energy into kinetic energy, which is called action. Boop. And that's how you get shit done. And there it is. And then you want to follow up with them, of course. Now, this is where people obsess over deadlines, follow up. And we don't do deadlines in the abstract. We do milestones because it's prerequisitional. Because it's prerequisitional. That's why. That is problem solving 101. That is how it's done. So when you are in a think tank and when you are assessing what is going on, it is vital that you have an established control group. Back to our example, in the mental health crisis, we are missing the control group, which is how does the subconscious mind work? And this is, it's vital. It's absolutely vital. The program that I have, the one that we are putting forth in Pando, is, well, I had multiple personality disorder, and I had 4 alters with 30 plus years of a whole lot of knowledge, including metaphysics, ontology, philosophy, psychology, physics, mathematics, problem solving. The 4 of us, my alters and I, literally mapped out the subconscious mind, and we dissected every nook and cranny of the subconscious mind. When we figured out how the subconscious mind works, we accumulated that data into execution. We created a plan just like this one, and we integrated. It took us 1 year to cure 100% of our mental illnesses because we had the formula. So once you know how a subconscious mind works, you have a control group. Once you have the control group, you have the ability to identify the types, the grouping, the characteristics, the categories, the compartmentalization required. Once you have that, you have the common denominators and the anomaly. Once you have that, you have the ability to assess what is the science of the chain reaction. What's the catalyst? What's the symptom? What's the true catalyst? Then you're able to assess what the true catalyst is, and you're able to identify it. Once you have the identified true catalyst, you have the ability to put in place a plan that addresses and solves the true catalyst of the problem. Once you address the true catalyst of the problem, the whole thing literally just waterfalls itself and it fixes itself, which is how I cured 5 incurable mental illnesses in 1 year. Anyone can do this because education is the true catalyst. Just education. Logic, education, and information is the true catalyst. You change the way we educate. You change the way we learn. You change what we learn. And now you have the door that opens up to awareness. People are walking around going, awareness is the start. No, it's not. Awareness is a symptom. Awareness is a false catalyst. Awareness does not cause change. Education causes change. And the very first thing everybody needs to learn is the true change is the right education, which is this information. Welcome to Pando. Thank you so much, and may the kindest of words always find you.